Hey, church family. As we turn to Genesis 38 today, we find a chapter filled with sex and deception. To be honest, it's a chapter that will offend our sensibilities. But as we study this chapter, we will see that even when we are faithless, God remains faithful. In this chapter, the author of Genesis pauses the story of Joseph to take a glimpse into the life of his older brother, Judah. Judah was the fourth son of Jacob, who would become known as Israel, by Leah. As the chapter opens, we're told some rather disturbing news. Judah leaves his brothers and marries the daughter of a Canaanite named Shua. Dr. Alan Ross writes, this act was out of harmony with the will of the patriarchs not to marry Canaanite women. Judah and his wife then have three sons, Onan, and Shelah. Marries a girl named Tamar, but was wicked, so the Lord put him to death. Then, following the custom of levirate marriage, Onan, lever or surrogate, takes Tamar to be his wife. But he was also wicked, so the Lord put him to death too. Judah, fearing for the life of his youngest son, Shelah, sent Tamar away to live as a widow in her father's house, not really intending to fulfill the custom of levirate marriage for Tamar, and thereby effectively preventing her from ever having children. Shelah grew up, but Judah never sent for Tamar. So when Judah's wife died, Tamar took matters into her own hands. She deceives Judah into sleeping with her by posing as a prostitute. And through that one encounter, Tamar becomes pregnant. When Judah finds out that Tamar is pregnant, he is livid. He calls for her to be burned. That is, until he learns that he is the father. Upon learning this truth, Judah remarks, "She is more righteous than I, since I did not give her to my son, Shelah." And he did not know her again. When we read through this chapter, we are appalled at the sex and the deception. But the sin in this passage that creates such brokenness is actually the faithlessness of Judah and his sons. Judah moved away from his family. He married a Canaanite woman. His sons, and Onan, were evil, and he refused to give Shelah to Tamar. Judah's sin led to brokenness and death. And without God's help, it would have left him without any heirs. But God had other plans. Because of God's faithfulness to his promise to make Israel into a great nation, we see at the end of the chapter that through his relationship with Tamar, Judah becomes the father of twins, Perez and Zerah. Years later, through the line of Perez, King David would be born. And eventually, through the line of King David, King Jesus would be born. Our sin will bring brokenness and death, whether relational or physical. But we can never thwart the plans and purposes of God. If today God is convicting you of sin, repent and return to him. Trust him and know that he will do all that he has promised to do. He remains faithful, even when we are faithless. Enjoy your time with Jesus today.